Hi everyone, so this is going to be another just kind of a character painting, so it's not going to be like the whole, a complete page, but one of the little creatures that I really think are adorable, even though in real life they're often far from adorable because they are definitely a winged predator, even though a lot of people associate them as being cute, and they are cute, don't get me wrong. But we have an eagle cam that is right down the street that's like world famous, and several times the eaglets, when they're trying to learn to fly, and even sometimes before they learn to fly, owls attack the nests and have done significant damage all the way up to killing them. So I mean, and even when they're like full-sized eagles, the owls will go after them. So they are definitely predators, but they're really cute predators. So I really kind of start doing these with just drawing the eyes. So this one is going to be a little bit of a 3/4 portrait, or head position anyway. So one eye will be kind of more rounded, and then the other eye, and we have to kind of, allow for space for the bridge of the nose. I often will just like put his little beak in, just to sort of give me an idea. But on this one, we're actually going to do it more like this, because we're actually just looking at the side of his eye. And then for my little owls, I like them to have this really big dark pupil area. And so for this little guy, we're going to do it more like this, because we don't see all of the eye technically. And really those three things are like the main things that we even need to sort of draw and place. And then for the rest of the little owl, we're going to do, and we're going to do this mostly with a brush, but I want to sort of instruct you on how to do it. So think of a big fluffy fat flower with all of these flower petals that are kind of going around his little eye. Like this. This is kind of how his this eye would be. And then this one, obviously it's the same thing, but most of the feathers you're not seeing, so you might just see a few that go like this, but then you go back to the really big, heavier ones, and you really don't see many that go this way either, because this eye is kind of more prominent. So then you might get some like so. You might even get a few that are a little bigger here, but not a lot. Like, it's not as heavy as it would be to the outside of this one. And then his little body, really I'll just give him, I'll put a wing in here. So we'll just have, this is kind of, that sort of shape of his little wing. And then you just have the rest of his little body. We'll give him a few little tufts, because those are super cute with little owls. And there will be sort of, the top of his head up here. And then from here, we can just have him come down and around. I mean, they're so super easy to do, and they require, almost no true drawing or anything like that. You can put his little feet in. I just do the 3 little claws. There is, a back one, but it's usually going to be behind the foot, so you won't actually see it, at least not in this position. You won't see it. And then he sort of has layers to his little feathers, and then there'll be another layer here. Okay, so this is like overall what we're going to do. But usually I don't do all this drawing, okay? I did this drawing so that you would be able to easily see what we were going to be painting. But usually I come in with watercolor or acrylic paint, whatever you're painting with, and I just kind of put all my stuff in. And then you know, with just the brush. And then if I really feel like I need to, I can come back in with a pencil and sort of get some details popping. But for the most part, this is, you know, more drawing than I actually do. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of anchor him, so to speak, in place by choosing a dark, and in this case I am going to go with the let's see if I can find my pavement color, which disappears on me every single time I go. I need to just like leave it out, because every time I put it away then I can't find it later. I don't know what I've done with it. Oh, here it is. It was hiding. Okay. So I'm going to use, let me organize a little here. We don't need to see my very painty mouse because we're not painting mice today. All right, so I'm just going to take some of this, and I'm definitely going to wet my brush so that the paint really kind of flows and moves around. And we are definitely painting this little guy in layers, so kind of keep that in mind. So the first thing is I'm going to make space for a highlight here, and I'll give him a much smaller one on this eye. So the first thing I'm going to do is paint these pupils nice and dark, just to start out with. Same thing on this one. Okay. And then this outline is also nice and dark. And it's not as neat as what we're painting it right now. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's going to get messier. But what we're doing is setting up all of our really strong darks right now. I'm actually going to round the bottom of that pupil a little more. Okay. So his little beak as well, nice and dark. I mean, you know, we want to keep these simple. We don't want to get too overly complicated, because we'll leave that to the people who really enjoy painting extreme realism. We're just going to paint whimsical, cute. Right, so we've sort of got our main elements, and I mean, quite honestly, he's a cute little owl already, right? It's just a drawing. So now we kind of need to work on creating some shadows around his eyes. So I'm just going to dip that brush into water a couple of times until I have kind of a dark gray wash. And then I'm going to look at a real picture of a real snowy little owl, whatever they're called. I forget what these are. And I'm going to just kind of look and see where does his, you know, feathers get really, really, you know, where's there a lot of depth. So with his eyes, for instance, there's a lot of depth kind of around them. The feathers are usually a little darker there. So we will, I'm not going to really do a lot over here, but we'll create a lot of depth with this, and we're even going to make this one a little darker. There we go. And then we're going to rinse that brush into water again. So now we just have a really light watery gray. And we're just going to bring that all the way around that eye. It doesn't have to be neat and orderly at all. All we're creating here is some depth to it. So I'm going to add a little shadow under this beak. And then I want a little shadow underneath and around the very outer edges of his feathers on his head. So I'm going to, you know, kind of make more of that wash. And then I'm just going to kind of come down here, and I'm going to say, you know, this is sort of under the big fat feathers, the flower shaped feathers that are around his face. So this is kind of under that. And so that's where I'm going to put some darkness. And then I'm also going to put just a little bit all the way around, but I'm going to do that with a different brush. So let me finish with this brush first. So remember how I said initially that this was kind of his wing? So there would be some shading kind of all the way around this, right? And then I also said in the beginning that he had these 3 sort of layers. So we're gonna also add a little shading in for each of those layers. And then we'll even put one down here. Okay, so we kind of start, you know, having layers happening. And then we'll do, I almost stopped, didn't I? We'll do some shadow around his head as well, but we're gonna do that with a different brush. So I'm going to get an angled brush. You can also just do this with a flat, just whatever brush you happen to have on hand. And I am gonna wet that, and then I'm just gonna come into this watered down paint, and I'm just going to sort of start determining where the top of his head is. And I'm gonna do that by kind of drawing out some flower shapes, so kind of like the ones we did there. So we'll draw some out here so that we have kind of an idea of the shape of him. And this also allows us to sort of determine things like where's the top of his head, that sort of thing. And again, these here, you know, I'm letting it kind of curve down on these. I should go this direction, but on these we can let it kind of pop out because that's obviously what our intent was. And then I'm going to do just some smaller ones that aren't really even feather shaped, and these will get painted over in a way, but they allow for some smaller feathers on his head. Alright, that's about all we can really get in before we start just bringing in our color. So I'm going to choose to make him kind of a tealy blue and I think a little bit of a rosy pink or a coral. Let me decide. Pink. I'm going to do this light pink color. And then there's lots of white in this little guy, so I'm going to do off-white and just regular white. All right, and I try to work my, I try to work in layers, and I try to get in his like main colors first, and then build white on top of that. I find that to be the most helpful, and then I can come in at the last minute and sort of put some more brighter color in. So I'm going to start with a base of this light turquoisey blue. Notice I'm using all kind of pastel colors. That's just because I'm really enjoying pastels. But you can do him in any deep color that you find interesting. And I'm actually just going to go over those longer petals that I drew initially. And it's a little bit of a different shape from that roundy sort of shape. It's a little more of a feather kind of shape. And I mostly want to cover over the lines that I drew so that they're not obvious, because they really weren't the point, if that makes any sense. They were just to demonstrate for you, but I don't really want them to be in the final piece too much anyway. Get a few over here, and we do have to kind of go up and down in brush size. So now I'm going to go to a really small flat and hit some of these smaller ones. And again, this is definitely a process of layering. So these will be under layers, not the top layers, if that makes sense. Most of them. Few of these, like these little ones here, might end up being more on the top. And then we're gonna do that same thing at the bottom down here, but first I'm just reinforcing some of these because again, I don't really want the initial drawing as the final feather shapes, or, you know, I don't want to see that, I guess, basically. Probably should go to my bigger brush, but all right, they're pretty well camouflaged at the top, so now I'm going to go back to the larger brush and start working down here at the bottom. And I am just going to kind of follow and go right over top of all those initial feathers that I drew. Remember, this is his wing, so it almost needs to round right here. And as I said before, there are a lot of layers to this. So I'm actually going to come down a little further and go over some of those shadowed areas. Again, kind of bringing in some of these shapes, and you definitely want some to be kind of irregular. If you make them all the exact same shape, then it's not as believable. So I'm going to move down to this next layer here. And again, I am fighting those circles. That's why I don't normally draw the circles first. I normally just leave them, or draw the feathers. I normally just leave them for the layering process with paint. And I am going to give him some kind of wild little ones that are going in odd directions around the bottoms of his feet. Alright, just making sure I've built in enough little feathers. It's pretty good. I'm going to switch over to the pink. The pink is also going to be in a kind of dominant color. I'm not rinsing the brush, so we might get some hints of purple. If we do, that's fine. So now we're just building up layers. So even in his little wing, my goodness, even in his little wing, he would have, I'm assuming, some layering. So we'll go ahead and build some of that in. Some of the bigger ones. Okay, just continuing on down, adding in little petal shapes that I'm using as his wing shape, or I mean his feather shape, his wing shape, his feathers. Sometimes you're teaching and you're thinking about your next brush stroke, and your brain and your mouth kind of get out of sync. It happens. If you're a teacher or you've ever tried to, teach anyone, you probably understand that. All right, I'm going to do just a few in his face. I want his face to almost predominantly be blue and white and not pink. So just a few. I'll just capture a couple of little areas where I went over his beak. I'll fix that though before I'm done. I'm going to stop and rinse, or at least kind of rinse. Sort of kind of rinse. And I'm just going to I've used up all the paint that was like sitting right around the edge. So I'm just going to put a couple in here. But again, I don't want the pink to dominate. So I will not do as much. Okay, we will see the pink again later, so that's the reason why. All right, so I'm going to rinse this, and I'll start in with the off-white, and I probably have some I can use out of this lid, maybe not very much though. Now this, I'm going to come right in and start almost giving it sort of, a feeling of a highlight. And I'm making these feathers because these are for the most part, shorter top layer feathers. So these I'm going to, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, these will be a little smaller. Now I have to move on to painting just out of the jar itself. So you just want to look for areas that need a little bit more filler, a little more color in there. Break up any super long feathers, that kind of stuff. Cover any areas that are still white. Highlight little feathers even if need be. And then for this little wing, I'm gonna do these in almost again, a sort of layered like we did his body. We're just gonna kind of layer this little wing a bit and let it sort of curve and maybe stand out. All right, so now here we're gonna do a lot less as we kind of come down. And I'm gonna focus on going over a lot of that pink because again, I don't want pink to be the dominant color. And you can stop, by the way, at any point where you're like, you know, I feel like this is an owl that I'm super happy with, because when you're first learning how to do something, you might overwork it and then you're not happy with it. Whereas when you've painted 5 or 10 of them, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it gets a little easier to make choices and to be comfortable with them. So now I am going to make a really light blue. And I think I'm going to stick with the smaller, shorter brush for the moment. So I'm going to take some of that aqua and white and I'm going to mix them so that I get a really light version. And it's because it's cooler, a cooler color, it should pop more so than the pink and the off-white do, if that makes sense. I do need to do some long ones. I need to not forget to get those long ones in there. Okay. And then a few of these in the body, and I'm going to stay away from the wing this time. I'm not going to add anything to the actual wing itself. I'll stick with just the larger body. I'm going to have to make up more. It should be about half and half, the light, whatever your first color was, and white, about half and half, or equal parts. So let me pay a little bit better attention so that I remember to make these kind of long. Okay. And then straight white. Just do a little bit, and we are going to change our brush for this, and we're going to go with a kind of a small round. It's a little bit of a stubby round, but I want this to be more like a highlight than a full feather. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this in every so often. And for this little wing right here, I'm going to again just kind of shape it a little. have to have enough paint on your brush that it's opaque, and I have a tendency to not get enough if I'm using just like out of the lid. So I'm gonna paint from the bottle. I'll get more white on my brush that way. Okay, so and then just a few here and there of pops of white here, but not overdoing it. And we won't put a lot of it down at the bottom at all, because he's not really got a lot of highlights down there. So let's go back to our pavement really quickly and fix his little beak. And again, it doesn't need to be super neat, it just needs to look, you know, evident or obvious that it is a little beak. Alright, and then finally we're going to make a little bit of a wash, again, of that dark color. Rinse my brush out, and I'm going to just start building up depth around these eyes. Same thing we did before, but multiple layers of it this time now. And what we're trying to do is kind of just that last little bit of shaping the around the eyes, just to kind of make them pop. I'm going to actually connect the three just a little bit. I'm going to put a little more just in a few spots. Kind of, if you think about it like when you're painting a tree, how you want to leave some open areas or put in some sky color into the branches, because, you know, trees aren't 100% solid. That's basically what we're doing, except what we're creating is some depth for the different parts of him that are not just a solid mass of feathers. So his little wing, you know, that kind of thing. And again, you're not, it's not at all necessary to be, you can be very abstract about it. It's not necessary to try to get or achieve, you know, some sort of realism here. We're just painting a cute owl. So don't stress about it. Don't listen to anyone who tells you it doesn't look like a real owl. You'd just be like, good, because I wasn't trying to paint a real owl. I was trying to paint a really cute little whimsical owl. Alright, I am going to soften just a little bit of what I've done here, because I just let it get a little dark. So all I'm going to do is have water on my brush, just come around and knock down some of those edges. I mean, not all of them. I think it looks good though, because it really makes his little wing pop. And then you have the last final little piece, which is determining the color of his eyes. I'm actually going to go with the pink that we painted him with, and just add a tiny little hint of maybe this coral, for instance, just something to pop it a little bit, because this is like a neon coral. And I'm going to add a little water because it's kind of thick. I find it easier to just put this in, and then I can do touch up with black as needed, you know, if needed. So I'm going to go into the white, and that's all pretty much dry. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to get just a tiny bit of white and just go over those highlights I left, because they did have a little of gray or black in them. And then I'm going to get just a tiny wash, just a hint of color, white or the peachy color, whatever it is. And we just want his eyes to look really realistic and glassy, so we'll put that in there and let it dry. And then the final thing that you can do if you want to just kind of have a little fun with it is go back into some of your original colors and, you know, maybe put just a few darker feathers just right in places where you might want a couple to really just pop out. Same thing with like his little wings. You can kind of just come in and make a few little wing feathers that kind of pop over that dark shadow area. Go. He's so cute. All right, I do want this one to be darker. Yeah, that looks good. Looks good. Clean up the eye a little bit. I'm gonna get a super tiny detail brush, so like a really crazy small one. And I'm actually gonna like close these up before I knock one of them over. Yeah. That's definitely a possibility of something that could happen. And actually, before I go into the dark black, now that I think about it, I'm going to go into just the bright white. And I just want to pop a little bit of a reflected highlight into the colored iris. So we'll let that dry. To now focus on just any little tiny bit of cleanup that you feel like you really need to do in the eyes. I don't want mine to be too perfect. I like them a little on the messy side. It just seems like when you're looking at, you know, a real eye, be it human or animal, it does have irregularities in it, little odd bits. Everyone's eyes are a little bit different. So I don't want to clean it up too much. I want it to be a little rough. And then I feel like this highlight is probably just a little too big, so I'm just gonna push that one back a little. There we go. All right, so I hope you enjoyed drawing our little owl sprite. That's what I'm going to call him. Oh, and the other thing that I was going to say was you can also come in and make up. I'm going to use a fan brush. A fan brush is like my favorite thing for if I want like a lot of spatter. So I'm just going to come into that original blue, and I'm actually just going to poke my brush down into it like so that I just get a little bit of paint. I'm going to put that paint out, and then I'm just going to use my water bottle and just make a wet soup. And yeah, there we go. He's cute, he's messy, imperfect, exactly the way a gold sprite owl should be, or an owl sprite. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that you feel a little more confidence in creating your own little owl character. And I will link several owl photos from Pinterest that I think you might find inspirational. There are so many types of owls that you can do, and they're so super cute. So I think you'll probably find that it's not all that hard to find inspiration for your own little owl. So thank you, and I will see you with the next lesson.